landed humans on the moon? All at once. 11, very good. What is the name of the Soviet mission in which the first human being was in space? Vostok 1. And again, I made the O's, I think, I probably don't do it justice. But yes. Sure. There is a movie called Apollo 13. Yes. 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 Starring Tom Hanks, I believe. So we're going to do the 1970s. It may be the communications teacher mean about why I've included these different speeches, but I think it's important to connect the political with the public domain. And in 1972, President Nixon gave the space shuttle speech, and it is in this speech that he articulated his vision for a fleet of spaceships, that could make space easily accessible, okay, for humans to be able to travel into outer space for the next decade. So the space shuttle program, and there have been some after that, we'll talk about those space shuttle programs. There have been five different fleets of ships, came out of Nixon's 1972 vision for this. In fairness, probably wouldn't say that we ever really reached Nixon's goal about making it accessible for humans. We certainly have had successful space shuttle missions and have gotten a lot of information from that, but if you really kind of looked at everything that Nixon wanted to accomplish in the 1970s, we really didn't reach that goal. A lot of budgetary concerns, technological issues occurred that did not quite make the ultimate goal and some of the specifics that Nixon wanted. So he used the term space frontier in this 1972 speech. He announced that he had already received congressional approval for funding, which is something we think now not very easily able to do. But certainly right after 1969, Congress was gung-ho about funding more space missions because we had been so successful with the moon landing. We'll talk more about this later, but the Space Shuttle Fleet Enterprise was rolled out in 1976, but this was just a test ship. It actually never flew in outer space. We'll talk about a lot of the space shuttles starting in 1981 was our first successful space shuttle launch, but the Enterprise was the first one that was actually created, but it was a test ship. It actually never left, never was launched. There's just Nixon and a spaceship-looking model for the space shuttle that he envisioned with the NASA administrators. We're going to talk about Pioneer 10. Again, so many different things going on in space. It's hard to kind of pick and choose which ones were the most important, but this one was definitely very diversified. We got information off of this mission that we hadn't gotten from others. March 2nd, 1972. So just 2 months after Nixon's speech, but this was not a space shuttle. This was not part of the space shuttle fleet. Pioneer 10, this was an unmanned, no humans on board of this craft. It was the first space probe that actually went to an outer planet. It was the first spacecraft to travel through an asteroid belt. That also may have been important to put down. I probably should have put that on. Oh, I did. Through an asteroid belt. We got up-close images of Jupiter. Pioneer 10, and there are a few times I'm like, wow, that is a huge technological feat. It sent its last communication to the last message, so it has since disintegrated in outer space, to Earth on January 22nd, 2003. So this probe launched in 1972. We were getting messages and data from that probe all the way to 2003. And it was 7.6 billion miles away when it sent that very last message. Okay? 7.6 billion miles away. Here's a fun fact for you about space. If you attempted to count all the stars in the galaxy, okay, so you go outside and you're trying to attempt in your backyard, not that you could do that, but you attempted to count all the stars in the galaxy at a rate of 1 star every second. So 1 star every second. It would take around 3,000 years count all of the stars. If you counted one star per second, it would take 3,000 years to count all of the stars in our galaxy. So just kind of a fun fact. Apollo 17, still part of that Apollo project, right? 11 was on the moon. Apollo 13 started, Tom Hanks, okay, movie Apollo 13. But we're going to talk about Apollo 17. It would be here forever if we talked about every Apollo mission. But this was the last mission of the Apollo project. Okay, so 17 was the last mission of the Apollo project. It includes the longest, and when I read this, I kind of had to go back to double check to make sure this was accurate. It's the last day that we've had on the moon. It was 1972, okay, and we haven't returned human beings to the moon since 1972. So the longest and the last day for humans on the moon. They were on the moon for 74 hours and 59 minutes. I don't know what kept them from that one more minute to make it even 75 hours, but 74 hours and 59 minutes. This is the first time we actually launched a geologist up into space to actually, study the rocks and the dust of the moon surface. This mission, we got the greatest amount of kind of the lunar samples to bring back to Earth to actually study what the moon was made of.
I've heard that they're trying to grow plants in lunar soil.
I'm sure they are. Yep. So, obviously we would like to, be able to do a lot more with the moon's resources, with the knowledge that we have. Eugene Cernan is the last man to walk to the moon. He was one of the astronauts on this mission, was one of the last men to walk the moon. We've got a picture of Apollo 17. Or picture from that. That picture's not quite as clear as I would like. Another just interesting tidbit about this mission is when the picture, one of the most famous pictures of Earth, that image was taken on this, and this photograph is called the blue marble because the astronauts said that the Earth outside, when they took the shot, looked like a blue marble. And that's one of the most famous images of planet Earth, and that was taken on the Apollo 17 mission. Yes?
That's the picture of
Yep, so we see that picture all the time. So, but that was taken now, from the Apollo 17 mission in 1972 is when that picture came.
Great observation.
Okay. To me, one of the most fascinating things about space started with Skylab 1, and that is the idea of astronauts living in space. Skylab 1 was the first kind of attempt at that. We will talk certainly about the International Space Station later. May 14, 1973 was when Skylab 1 was launched. It's the first United States or American laboratory that orbits around in space. And it orbited in space up until 1979. So 6 years Skylab 1 was up in space. So this was, for lack of a better term, a workshop. Okay? It was a solar observatory to kind of observe the sun and other systems that orbited the Earth. The total Skylab project orbited the Earth 2,476 times. Astronauts performed 10 spacewalks, totaling 42 hours and 16 minutes. The total project, and I will repeat this if you all want, I just thought these were kind of interesting details. Skylab project logged about 2,000 hours of scientific and medical experiments in outer space. So 2,000 hours of scientific and medical experiments. 127,000 frames of film of the sun. 127,000 frames of film of the sun. And 46,000 frames of the Earth. So taking lots of different pictures and images of the sun, 127,000 images and 46,000 images of the Earth. This is what was interesting to me. Here's a typical day in the life on Skylab 1, according to one of the astronauts who woke up. A typical day usually began at 6 a.m. Central Time Zone. Okay, so obviously space time and Earth time is way different, but equivalent to 6 a.m. Central Time Zone. Although the toilet was small and noisy, veteran astronauts and rookies that were part of this project over the course of the years actually complimented it in comparison to past toilets. The first crew enjoyed taking a shower once a week. So the first crew on Skylab took a shower once a week, but they found that drying themselves off in a weightlessness environment was really difficult. So later crews at Skylab actually cleaned themselves daily with wet washcloths instead of using the shower. I found this interesting. Astronauts also found that bending over in weightlessness, like if you were tying a shoe or whatever, to put on socks, tying shoelaces, strained their stomach muscles. That one of the real difficulties in outer space is actually just bending over. Okay? Breakfast began at 7 a.m. Astronauts usually stood to eat because sitting down in microgravity also strains the stomach muscles. So most of what they would do standing up. Okay, they reported their food, although better than what the Apollo astronauts had eaten, as being very bland and repetitive. Okay, so not great food in outer space. After breakfast, in preparation for lunch, they would do experiments, tests, they would repair the spacecraft systems, and if possible, 90 minutes of physical exercise. Okay, astronauts, whether they're on a space shuttle, whether they're living in one of these workshops, very physical, grueling, they have to be in top physical shape. So if possible, they would try to get in 90 minutes of physical activity. After dinner, which was usually scheduled around 6 p.m., the crews would perform household chores in the workshop. You know, you got to do the dishes, okay, and prepare for the next day's experiment. Okay, following lengthy daily instructions, okay, that were sent via a teleprinter. And some of the instructions were 15 meters long when it would print out from NASA. Okay? The crews were often busy enough to postpone sleep. They reported not getting much sleep because they would, the instructions would often take so long to read. They had a dart set, they had playing cards, and other recreational equipment like books and music players. But the astronauts reported that the most popular relaxation or, downtime that they would do would literally just be sitting and looking out the windows and the glass, for lack of a better term, to look at outer space. The dart set, the playing cards didn't get a lot of use because it was so awesome to just take in the environment around them. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that if you put two pieces of metal together in space, that they would permanently stick together? Does anybody know that? Some of you science buffs? Okay, the reason why is two pieces of metal that don't have proper coating on them will form into one piece in the vacuum of space. Okay, we don't have that here on Earth because then we put a layer of oxidized material between the surfaces, and all the metal that we send up into space, we make sure to have that proper coating so that metal material doesn't stick together. So I thought that was interesting. Putting two pieces of metal together in space without that proper coating means those metals would fuse together. Oh, sorry. Here's Skylab. Here's the kitchen area, the eating area. Obviously, that's a mannequin, not a real person. And here's a demonstration of the Skylab laboratory. July 1975, we did a joint mission with the Soviet Union, Apollo, coming from the United States end, and Soyuz coming from the Soviet end in July 1975. So U.S. astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts, I should have probably separated that out. Astronauts is an Americanized term. Soviet cosmonauts, okay, docked in space together for 2 days. Okay, so they docked in space together for 2 days. It did provide very important engineering information for further international cooperation, like the International Space Station, the Shuttle Mir project, which we won't talk too much about today. Okay. They were two separate launches. So the United States launched a spacecraft, the Soviets launched a spacecraft. They were about within 7.5 hours of each other, the launches were. And then 3 hours later, the two mission commanders, when the two docked together in space, okay, had the first international handshake in outer space, which seems a little like, that's kind of weird to talk about, but considering the intensity of the rivalry between the Soviets and Americans, to have that